After Lorraine died, my son Marcus and his people showed up with a lawyer and said, "Dad, you're 66. You can't run this restaurant alone. Sign it over before you lose everything." But what they didn't know was that 7 months before she took her last breath, Lorraine handed me a recipe box and whispered, "When the vultures come for our kitchen, give them the building. Keep the soul." And now I understand exactly what she meant. I am truly grateful that you are here. Quick question. Where are you watching from? Drop your location below. Please note that this is a fictional story crafted to explore deep lessons about family and legacy. If you do not like it, feel free to leave. I held Lorraine's hand as the monitor went silent at 6:12 in the morning on January the 15th, 2024. That sound, that flat, endless tone cutting through the dim hospital room, is something no amount of years will erase from my memory. I had been awake all night in the chair beside her bed at Memorial Health Savannah, watching the green line of her heartbeat rise and dip across the screen. For 38 years I had known the rhythm of Lorraine Marie Fontaine's heart, the way it quickened when she was angry, the way it steadied when she cooked. Now it was just a flat line and a tone that would not stop. Time of death, 6:12 a.m. The doctor spoke with that practiced gentleness they must teach in medical school, then reached past me and silenced the machine. The sudden quiet was worse than the beeping. Lorraine's hand was still warm in mine, her fingers still curled slightly, the way they always did when she held a wooden spoon, or my hand, or both at the same time. Her skin held heat even though everything else about her, the fight, the breath, the steel behind those gray-brown eyes, had gone cold. Celia stood at the foot of the bed. My daughter was 34 years old, strong as live oak, and she wept without making a sound. Tears ran down her face and dripped onto the linoleum, and she did not wipe them. She just stood there, hands at her sides, watching her mother's chest for one more rise that would never come. "Dad." Her voice broke on the single syllable. "Dad, I am so sorry." I nodded. That was all I could manage. My throat had closed around something too large for words. The nurse touched my shoulder. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Fontaine." She and the doctor slipped out. The door clicked shut, with a sound so soft, it felt like a whisper. Celia came around and knelt beside me. She pressed her forehead against my arm, and I felt her tears soak through my sleeve. "Mama is gone," she whispered. I smoothed the strand of silver hair from Lorraine's forehead. She had worn it natural these last 2 years, after the medication made it thin and brittle. When it grew back thick and gray, she had laughed and said, "Guess the Lord decided I earned my crown early." She had. Lord knows she had. "She is," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone standing very far away. "Your mother is gone." We sat there in the fluorescent hum of that 6th-floor room, and I tried to understand how the world outside that window could keep turning when Lorraine Fontaine had just stopped. The Savannah River was still flowing. Cars still moved across the Talmadge Bridge. Somewhere in this city, someone was frying eggs and pouring coffee and complaining about traffic, and none of them knew that the woman who had fed this town for 35 years would never lift a spatula again. Celia finally straightened. She wiped her face with both hands and took a breath that shook her entire body. "I will call Reggie and the staff, and I will try Marcus again." Marcus. I had been waiting for her to say the name. My son, 40 years old. The boy I had taught to crack an egg with one hand. The young man I had trusted to learn the business. The adult I had fired 12 years ago for selling my mother-in-law's gumbo recipe to a restaurant chain in Atlanta for $35,000. When Marcus did not come, I said quietly. Celia looked at her boots. "I called him 4 times last night. Texted him. Janelle finally answered around 2:30 in the morning and said he would call back. He never did. The anger should have come then, hot and righteous, but all I felt was a hollow ache somewhere beneath my ribs, like someone had scooped out everything that mattered and left just the shell. Lorraine had warned me. 3 weeks ago, When she could still speak without the oxygen mask fogging her words, she had gripped my wrist with surprising strength and looked me straight in the eye. "Marcus will not come," she said. "He has other plans. You will see." I had not wanted to believe her. "Celia, go make your calls. I need a minute." She left. The door whispered shut again. I sat alone with the woman who had been my whole world and let myself feel the weight of what she had told me in those final weeks. The recipe box on the shelf at home, the envelope sealed with red wax, her voice, thin but certain. "When they come for the kitchen, give them the building. Keep the soul." I had not understood then. But sitting in that quiet room, holding the hand that would never stir another pot of gumbo, I was beginning to. At 10:22 that morning, 4 hours and 10 minutes after Lorraine died, my phone finally rang. Marcus. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Dad." His voice was steady, businesslike. The same tone he used when he called vendors or negotiated leases back when he still worked for us. Celia texted me. "I am sorry about Mama." Sorry. One word. Delivered like he was apologizing for missing a reservation. "Where were you?" I asked. A pause. "I had some things to handle. I would have been there if I could. If I could." Like his mother dying was a scheduling conflict. "Your sister was there," I said. "Your mother asked for you." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear Janelle's voice in the background, muffled, impatient. "Dad, I know this is hard. We will need to talk about arrangements. And the restaurant situation. The lease, the accounts, the staff. We should sit down with someone professional. The restaurant situation." Lorraine had been gone 4 hours, and my son was already circling the kitchen like a vulture over roadkill. "Marcus," I said quietly, "your mother just died." "I know, Dad. That is why we need to." "Goodbye, Marcus." I hung up before he could finish. I sat in the silence of that hospital room and stared at Lorraine's face. Peaceful now. No more pain. No more fighting. Just stillness and the faint smell of the lavender oil Celia had rubbed on her wrists last night. She had told me this moment would come. She had planned for it. Prepared for it. Tried to warn me. "You will see," she had said. "When I am gone, Marcus will show you who he really is. And Earl, when that happens, I need you to trust me. I need you to do exactly what I have asked." I had not fully understood then. But sitting in that quiet room, I understood perfectly. Lorraine had known. She had seen it coming long before the rest of us. And wherever she was now, up in that big kitchen in the sky she always joked about, she was watching to see if I had the strength to follow her plan. I looked at her face one last time. "I will trust you," I whispered. I watched 200 people fill First African Baptist Church on Saturday, January the 18th, 3 days after Lorraine died. They came in non-slip kitchen shoes and pressed white shirts. Men and women who had spent decades chopping onions and scrubbing pots and plating food at 2 in the morning, standing shoulder to shoulder in those old wooden pews like they were lining up for the dinner rush. Some of them had worked with Lorraine since the beginning. Others were young enough to be her grandchildren. But every single one of them showed up. The church smelled like old hymnals and lemon wood polish. Morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting blue and gold shadows across the worn carpet. First African Baptist was the oldest black church in North America, built in 1788. And Lorraine had attended every Sunday for 30 years. She used to say God lived in old kitchens and older churches because both required faith and patience in equal measure. I sat in the front pew. Celia on my left, her hand gripping mine so tight I could feel her pulse in my fingers. And an empty space on my right, where Marcus should have been. The service was supposed to start at 10. At 10:30, the sanctuary doors creaked open, and Marcus walked in with Janelle on his arm. 30 minutes late, to his own mother's funeral. I did not turn around. But I heard the whispers ripple through the congregation, heard the shuffle of feet, as they made their way down the center aisle. Reggie Boudreau, sitting 2 rows behind me, let out a breath that was half sigh and half something much less polite. Marcus slid into the pew beside me, smelling like cologne that probably cost more than our dishwasher made in a week. "Sorry we are late," he muttered. "Traffic on I-16. I kept my eyes forward. There is no traffic on I-16 at 10 in the morning on a Saturday. Not the kind that makes you 30 minutes late to say goodbye to the woman who gave you life." Janelle sat down next to Marcus. And that is when I saw it. The dress. Ivory-colored, designer label, fitted like it was sewn for a runway and not a funeral. And dangling from the tag still attached at the back seam, a price sticker. $1,800. She had bought a new dress for the funeral and had not even bothered to remove the tag. Celia saw it too. I felt her stiffen beside me. Her grip on my hand tightened until my knuckles ached. But before either of us could say a word, Reggie Boudreau stepped up to the pulpit. Reggie was 57 years old, built like a cast-iron Dutch oven, with hands that could julienne an onion in 9 seconds flat, and a voice that carried across a kitchen louder than any hood vent. He had been our head chef for 25 years. When Lorraine hired him back in 1999, fresh out of a bad situation in New Orleans, he had told her he did not take instruction from anyone. She had handed him a wooden spoon, pointed to a pot of roux on the stove, and said, "Then stir that until you learn." He learned. Lorraine Marie Fontaine. Reggie began, his voice steady but thick, with something he was fighting hard to keep down. "Was the finest cook and the toughest woman I have ever known. And I have known some tough women." Soft laughter moved through the pews. She started Fontaine's table in 1989 with a second-hand stove. $47. And the kind of stubborn that could burn water out of sheer will. Most folks did not think a young black woman belonged running a fine restaurant in Savannah back then. Lorraine proved them wrong every single night. One plate at a time. Reggie talked about the early years. About Lorraine showing up to the kitchen at 4 in the morning to start the stocks, because she did not trust anyone else to get the flavor right. About the time she drove to Tybee Island in a tropical storm to pick up fresh shrimp because the delivery truck could not make it and she refused to serve frozen. About how she knew every regular's name, their children's names, their anniversaries, and exactly what dish would make a bad day better. "She taught me to make gumbo in 1999, Reggie said. "Took her 3 months. She made me start over 41 times. 41. Every time I thought I had it, she would taste 1 spoonful and shake her head and say, 'Reggie, love cannot be rushed. Start again.' On the 42nd try, she tasted it, and she smiled, and she said, 'Now you understand.'" His voice cracked on the last word. He gripped the edges of the pulpit. "That is what Lorraine taught every single person in this room. That the things worth having take time. That shortcuts ruin everything. That love, real love, is not a shortcut. It is a slow roux. Golden and patient." I listened to Reggie's words and felt 38 years pressing down on my chest like a hand. Lorraine had been my partner in every sense. Business, life, kitchen, bed, faith. Without her, I was just an old man sitting in a church pew trying to figure out how to keep breathing. The service lasted 50 minutes. The pastor said words about homegoing and glory and the bread of life. He said Lorraine was cooking in heaven's kitchen now, and I wanted to believe that more than I wanted to believe anything. After the service, we moved to the fellowship hall for the repast. Long tables groaned under dishes brought by neighbors and church family. Shrimp and grits, fried okra, collard greens, cooked low and slow, red rice, sweet potato pie, peach, cobbler. Lorraine would have inspected every dish and given notes. She could not help herself. Marcus and Janelle stayed exactly 20 minutes. I timed it on the clock above the kitchen pass-through. They made 1 round through the food line, Janelle barely touching anything, Marcus shaking a few hands with that salesman's smile that never reached his eyes. Then they left. Marcus mumbled something about a commitment back in Atlanta, but it was Janelle who made me clench my jaw. As they walked to their car, she slowed down in front of the restaurant. Fontaine's table sat right there on East Broughton Street, just 2 blocks from the church. I watched through the fellowship hall window as Janelle pulled out her phone and took 3 photographs of the building. The facade, the sign, the front door. She studied the photos on her screen, nodded to herself, and climbed into their black SUV. Celia appeared at my elbow. She had seen it too. "Dad." Her voice was tight. "Did Janelle just photograph the restaurant?" I watched the SUV pull away from the curb. "Yes," I said. "She did. Why would she do that?" I thought about Lorraine's words. The envelope sealed with red wax. The recipe box heavy with something more than recipes. I thought about the warning my wife had given me 3 weeks before she died. Her eyes clear and certain even as her body failed. "Because they are not here to mourn your mother," I said quietly. "They are here to take inventory. Promise, Lorraine. I promise." The crew stayed for hours. Long after Marcus and Janelle disappeared in their black SUV, long after the pastor shook my hand and said words I cannot remember, the kitchen people remained. They sat in folding chairs around those fellowship hall tables and told stories about Lorraine Fontaine like they were trying to keep her alive through sheer repetition. Tommy Beaufort, who had washed dishes for us for 19 years, told the one about Lorraine catching a seafood vendor, swapping day-old shrimp into the fresh bins. She had made him drive back to Tybee and replace the entire order at his own expense. Then she had called every restaurant owner she knew and told them what he had done. The man lost 6 accounts in one afternoon. Nobody cheated Lorraine twice. Desiree Watkins, our pastry chef, told about the Christmas Eve. Lorraine found her crying in the walk-in cooler over a man who had left her. Lorraine had pulled up 2 overturned milk crates, sat them both down among the hanging herbs and stacked butter, and said, "Baby, a man who leaves on Christmas Eve was never really there to begin with. Now dry your face and help me roll out this pie crust. Dough does not care about heartbreak, and neither should you." Desiree laughed and cried at the same time telling it. Reggie told 3 more stories. Each one made people laugh and then go quiet. The room smelled like casserole steam and strong coffee and grief, all mixed together into something heavy and warm. I sat and listened and let their voices wash over me. These people, these kitchen-rough, loyal, stubborn people, had loved my wife, and she had loved them back with a fierceness that showed up in extra shifts covered without complaint, in birthday cakes that appeared in the break room without announcement, in the way she remembered every child's name and every doctor's appointment and every anniversary. By 6:30, the hall had emptied. Celia drove me home. The January evening was cold for Savannah, the kind of damp chill that crept under your collar and settled in your bones. Spanish moss hung motionless from the live oaks lining Jones Street, and the street lamps cast yellow pools on the sidewalk. The house felt wrong the moment I opened the door. Too quiet. Too still. The old Victorian cottage on East Jones Street had never been silent. Not in 34 years of living here. There had always been Lorraine humming in the kitchen, or the sound of her knife on the cutting board, or the radio playing Aretha Franklin while she prepped for the next day's service. Now there was nothing but the creak of old wood and the distant sound of a car passing on Abercorn Street. I walked through the kitchen. Lorraine's coffee mug still sat by the sink, the one that said head chef, chief financial officer, and do not mess with me, that Celia had given her 3 Christmases ago. Past the photos on the hallway wall. Our wedding in 1986 at this very church. The kids as babies. The restaurant sign the day we hung it on East Broughton Street in '89. Lorraine grinning so wide you could count every tooth. I stopped in front of her chair. The green wingback she had claimed 20 years ago, worn smooth in the armrests from where she sat every evening, reviewing invoices and supplier orders. A reading lamp beside it, still angled the way she liked. Her glasses folded on the side table, The chair was empty. It would always be empty now. Celia had gone to check on the restaurant staff. I was alone. I sat on the couch and stared at that empty chair and tried to remember how to breathe without counting. Then I heard the back door open. Small footsteps on the kitchen tile. Quick, light. The sound of a child trying to be quiet and failing. Grandpa? Theo appeared in the living room doorway. 8 years old. All elbows and energy. Wearing a suit that was already too short in the sleeves and a clip-on tie that had gone crooked. He was Marcus's boy. But he had Lorraine's eyes, dark brown and sharp and too observant for a child his age. He must have come back with Celia's neighbor, Mrs. Beaumont, who had been watching him during the service. "Hey, buddy." I leaned forward. "You doing okay?" He nodded. Then he glanced over his shoulder toward the kitchen, making sure no one else was there. He reached into his suit jacket, the inside pocket, and pulled out something I did not expect. A box. Small. Made of pecan wood. Dark and polished smooth from decades of handling. I recognized it immediately. It had sat on the top shelf in Lorraine's kitchen office for as long as I could remember. Her recipe box. The one her grandmother, Mama Irene, had given her in 1978 when Lorraine was 16 years old and learning to cook on a wood-burning stove in Beaufort, South Carolina. My hands trembled as I took it from him. It was heavier than it should have been. Heavier than a box of index cards had any right to be. "Grandma gave me this last week," Theo whispered. His voice was so quiet, I had to lean close to hear. "She said you would know when to open it. She said to keep it secret, until after." "After what, buddy?" "After the church. After everybody leaves. She said you would need it, when the house got quiet." I stared at the box. The pecan wood was warm from being pressed against Theo's small body inside his jacket. He had carried it through the entire funeral, through the service and the cemetery and the repast. This 8-year-old boy had kept his grandmother's secret tucked against his heart. "Thank you, Cooper." I caught myself. "Thank you, Theo." I managed. He nodded with a solemnity that broke something open inside my chest. Then he hugged me, quick and fierce, his thin arms squeezing my neck. "I love you, Grandpa. I miss Grandma." "I love you too, buddy." "I miss her too." He pulled away and ran back toward the kitchen. I heard Mrs. Beaumont's voice calling him, and the back door opened and closed again. I sat alone with the recipe box in my lap. I ran my fingers over the smooth wood, the tiny brass hinges, the latch worn gold from years of Lorraine's thumb flipping it open. I lifted the lid. On top, a stack of index cards in Lorraine's handwriting. Recipes. Mama Irene's shrimp and grits. Lorraine's she-crab soup. The blackened redfish. The peach cobbler with brown butter crust. 40 years of flavors written in blue ink on yellowed cards. But beneath the cards, something else. Something that made my breath stop. An envelope. Cream-colored, sealed with red wax pressed into a fleur-de-lis pattern. Lorraine's handwriting across the front, neat and deliberate. The letters formed with the same precision she used to plate a dish. For Earl. Open when Marcus brings the vultures. I stared at those words until they blurred. My hands shook so badly the envelope trembled between my fingers. She had known. Lying in that hospital bed with tubes in her arms and oxygen in her nose, she had known exactly what was coming. She had prepared this, sealed it, given it to an 8-year-old boy and trusted him to deliver it at the right moment. I set the envelope back in the box and closed the lid. My thumb rested on the latch. "Not yet," I said to the empty room. Not yet, but my hands would not stop shaking. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I could hear Lorraine's voice, quiet and certain the way it always was when she had already made up her mind. "You will know when, Earl. Trust me. You will know." The doorbell rang at 2 in the afternoon on January the 28th, 13 days after the funeral. I was in the living room sorting through Lorraine's cookbooks, the ones she kept on the shelf beside her green chair. Creole classics, handwritten journals from Mama Irene, dog-eared copies of Edna Lewis and Leah Chase that she had read so many times the spines had cracked and been taped back together twice. I was holding Mama Irene's journal, the one with the original shrimp and grits recipe penciled inside the front cover in 1962, when the chime sounded. I was not expecting anyone. Celia had called that morning to say she would stop by after closing the restaurant for the evening. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see 4 silhouettes. My gut tightened like someone had cinched a belt around my stomach. I opened the door. Marcus stood on my porch in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Charcoal gray, slim fit. Pocket square folded into a crisp peak. Behind him, Janelle in oversized designer sunglasses despite the January overcast. An older man I did not recognize. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a navy blazer and carrying a leather briefcase monogrammed with the initials DC. And beside him, a wiry man in his 50s with a legal pad already open in his hands. "Dad." Marcus smiled. The kind of smile that does not move past the mouth. "Can we come in? We need to talk." 40 years of being Marcus's father made me step aside when I should have shut the door. They filed in like they owned the place already. The older man with the briefcase made a straight line for Lorraine's green chair and sat down without asking. Without a single word of permission. He settled into it, like he was testing furniture in a showroom. My hands clenched at my sides. That was my wife's chair. That was the chair where Lorraine sat every single night. For 20 years reviewing the books, calling vendors, planning menus. The fabric still held the shape of her body, and this stranger just dropped himself into it like it was nothing. "Get out of that chair," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended, but something in the tone made the room go still. The man blinked behind his glasses. "Excuse me? That was my wife's chair. Get out of it. Now." Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then he stood, smoothing his blazer, and moved to the couch. His mouth pressed into a thin line, but he did not argue. Marcus cleared his throat. "Dad, this is Dwayne Curtis, Janelle's brother. He is a restaurant consultant, specializes in acquisitions and transitions for family-owned establishments. And this," Dwayne gestured to the wiry man, "is Graham Webb, an attorney who handles business transitions and elder care planning." Elder care. The words hit me like a slap wrapped in silk. "Mr. Fontaine," Graham Webb said, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "We are here to discuss a transition plan for Fontaine's table. Given your recent bereavement and your age, we believe it is in everyone's best interest for Marcus to assume full ownership and operational control of the restaurant." I looked at my son, at the boy who used to stand on a chair beside his mother and stir roux until his arm ached, at the man who now stood in my living room with a hired lawyer and his wife's brother, trying to take the thing his mother built. "You are here to take my restaurant," I said. "We are here to protect the business," Marcus said. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, but not enough to stop. "Dad, you are grieving. You are not thinking clearly. The restaurant needs leadership. Consistent professional leadership. Consistent leadership. Like selling your grandmother's gumbo recipe to strangers for $35,000? That kind of leadership?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "That was 12 years ago, Dad. I made a mistake. I have grown. Since then." Dwayne leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "Mr. Fontaine, let me be direct. Marcus has the vision and the connections to take Fontaine's table to the next level. National recognition, franchise potential, but that requires modern management. The restaurant industry has evolved. And with all due respect, at 66, after losing your wife, this is not the time to 66. I said, "Get out." Graham Webb held up a hand like a traffic cop. "Mr. Fontaine, I need you to understand. Marcus is prepared to file a conservatorship petition with the Chatham County Probate Court. We have documentation. Missed vendor payments this month. A health inspection rescheduled. Staff reporting that you have not been present at the restaurant since your wife's passing. I have been burying my wife, I said. The words burned coming out, which is exactly why you need support, Dwayne said smoothly. No one is trying to hurt you, Earl. This is about preserving what Lorraine built. Sign the restaurant over to Marcus. Step back. Take an advisory role. Let someone younger handle the day-to-day while you heal. I looked at Marcus, searching for something. Regret. Shame. Some flicker of the boy who had cried when his goldfish died at age 6. But all I saw was Dwayne's hand on his shoulder and Janelle's sunglasses reflecting my own face back at me. No, I said. Graham snapped his legal pad closed. We will be filing on Monday, Mr. Fontaine. I would advise you to retain counsel. The front door slammed open. Celia stood in the doorway, still wearing her kitchen whites, her chef's coat stained with what looked like tomato reduction. Her face was flushed and her jaw was set in that way that made her look exactly like Lorraine, right before Lorraine tore someone apart. What is happening in my father's house? Marcus turned. Celia. This does not concern. Like hell it does not. Celia took 3 steps into the room, and every person in that living room seemed to shrink. Mrs. Beaumont called me saying 4 people in fancy clothes showed up at Dad's door looking like trouble. Looks like she was right. She pointed at the door. Get out. All of you. Now. Dwayne stood, buttoning his blazer with exaggerated calm. We will be in touch, Mr. Fontaine. They filed out. Marcus paused at the threshold. For a moment, his eyes met mine, and I thought I saw something. A flash of the boy he used to be. But then Janelle called his name from the porch, sharp and impatient, and whatever I had seen disappeared. The door closed. Celia turned to me, breathing hard. Dad, what was that? What are they trying to do? I did not answer her. I stood up on legs that felt borrowed from another body and walked to the stairs. My hand gripped the banister. Dad, give me a minute, baby. I need to get something. Upstairs. Bedroom. Nightstand drawer. The recipe box sat exactly where I had placed it 13 days ago. I lifted it out and ran my thumb over the smooth pecan wood. Then I opened the lid and looked at the envelope resting beneath the recipe cards. Lorraine's handwriting. Steady and sure. For Earl. Open when Marcus brings the vultures. Marcus had brought the vultures. 4 of them, in expensive suits, with briefcases and legal threats, and a plan to take everything Lorraine built. I carried the box downstairs. Celia was still standing in the living room, arms crossed, waiting. What is that? She asked. Your mother's plan, I said. And I think it is time I read it. I opened the envelope at 10:34 that night. Celia had gone home around 8. After I convinced her I was fine, that I just needed rest. She had looked at me the way Lorraine used to look when she knew I was lying but loved me enough to let me have the lie. Be careful, Dad, she said at the door. Whatever Mama left in there, it is going to change things. Call me when you are ready. After she left, I made a pot of coffee in Lorraine's old percolator. The one that took 12 minutes and made the whole kitchen smell like chicory and patience. I did not intend to drink it. I just needed the sound. The familiar gurgle and hiss of it working, something Lorraine in the room with me. Now I sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Lorraine had reviewed invoices every evening for 30 years. The pendant light cast a warm circle on the wood, and outside that circle, the house was dark. The recipe box sat open in front of me, the index cards set aside in a neat stack, and the envelope in my hands, cream-colored, sealed with red wax, pressed into a fleur-de-lis. I broke the seal. The wax cracked cleanly, and I pulled out 3 pages of notebook paper covered in Lorraine's handwriting. Blue ink. Neat and precise. The letters formed with the same care she used to write menu specials on the chalkboard every morning. The first page was dated July the 20th, 2023. 6 months before she died. My dearest Earl. If you are reading this, then Marcus has shown you who he really is. I am sorry, my love. I know you hoped he would be different this time. So did I, for longer than I should have. Last May, I found something I was not supposed to see. Janelle left her handbag at Sunday dinner. You remember? She said she would pick it up Monday. I was going to set it by the door, but the clasp was open and a folded paper was sticking out. The header said Magnolia Grill Franchise Group. And I could not stop myself. Earl. It was a draft acquisition agreement. Dwayne Curtis has been in contact with Magnolia Grill, that fast casual chain out of Charlotte that has been buying up southern restaurant brands across the Southeast. They want Fontaine's Table. Not the food. Not the love we put into it. The brand. The name. The location. They offered $6 million. The split was written in pencil in the margin. Dwayne. 40%. Marcus. 35%. Janelle. 25%. $6 million divided among 3 people who never once woke up at 4 in the morning to start a stock pot. Their plan is simple. Wait until I die. Move fast while you are grieving. Take the restaurant through legal pressure or conservatorship, then sell the brand to Magnolia Grill within 12 months. Marcus gets the title and runs operations just long enough for the sale to close. Dwayne handles the deal. Janelle collects her share and disappears. They think the restaurant is worth $6 million because of the name on the sign. They do not understand that the name means nothing without what is behind it. The recipes, the relationships, the soul. I set the first page down. My hands were shaking badly enough that the paper rattled against the table. I picked up the second page. The header read the real numbers, written in Lorraine's block print. What they think they are getting. Brand value, Fontaine's Table, estimated $6 million based on Magnolia Grill offer. Building and location, East Broughton Street. Leased not owned. Equipment, commercial kitchen, valued at $480,000. Cash on hand, $95,000. Accounts receivable, $42,000. Total perceived assets, $6,617,000. What they are actually getting. Building lease, $12,500 per month for 15-year term. Remaining obligation, $1,500,000. Equipment loans, $890,000. Monthly payment, $18,200 for 48 months. Vendor accounts payable, $340,000. Tybee Fresh Seafood, Savannah Produce Collective, Low Country Meats, 6 other suppliers. On net 30 terms. Food contamination lawsuit pending. $280,000 claimed. Will likely settle for $60,000, but only with Earl's reputation and relationships intact. IRS payroll tax payment plan. $185,000. Monthly payment, $4,800. Zero tolerance for missed payments. Liability insurance premium. Past due, $22,000. Total liabilities, $3,117,000. At the bottom, in red ink, Lorraine had underlined twice. Net value without recipes and Earl's relationships. Negative $2,500,000. They are buying a sinking ship and they do not know it. Then beneath that, in her regular blue ink, the secret. The recipes, all 40 years of intellectual property, were registered with the United States Copyright Office in August 2023 under my name, Lorraine Marie Fontaine. Upon my death, all culinary intellectual property transfers to the Celia Fontaine Irrevocable Trust. Fontaine's Table brand is contractually tied to a culinary IP licensing agreement. Whoever owns the restaurant without the IP license owns nothing but a building, a lease, and debt. The soul stays with Celia. I read it twice. Then a third time. My coffee sat untouched and growing cold beside me. Lorraine had spent her dying months not resting, not making peace, but building a trap so elegant and so complete that Marcus would walk straight into it believing he had won. I picked up the third page. It was shorter. A timeline. 5 phases, written in numbered steps with Lorraine's precise hand. Phase 1. Wait for Marcus to make his move. He will. Dwayne will not let him wait long. Phase 2. Offer to give him the restaurant. Make it look like surrender. Helen Chastain will draft the paperwork. Offer a forensic audit. They will refuse because Dwayne will not wait 6 weeks and spend $30,000 when he thinks he is getting a $6 million payday. Phase 3. The signing. Formal transfer. Notarized. Make sure Marcus signs personal liability for all debts. Every lease payment. Every vendor account. Every loan. Make sure he signs the waiver acknowledging receipt of financial disclosures. Phase 4. Watch. Do not interfere. Without Earl's relationships, the suppliers will tighten. Without the recipes, the food will change. Without the soul, the customers will leave. Estimated timeline: 90 to 120 days before complete collapse. Phase 5. Rebuild. Celia takes the insurance money, $800,000 split 50-50 between her and Theo's trust. She opens a new restaurant. Small, clean, no debt. Lorraine's recipes. Earl consults. Hire back the loyal crew. Build something honest from the ashes. At the very bottom of the third page, one final note in Lorraine's handwriting. The letters slightly uneven, written perhaps on a day when the medication made her hands less steady. Earl. This will hurt. Watching Marcus fail will hurt worse than almost anything. But some lessons cannot be taught with words. They have to be learned through losing everything. And some sons cannot be saved from themselves. But we can save Celia. We can save Theo. And we can save what Mama Irene gave me 46 years ago. Give them the building, my love. Keep the soul. The soul is in the recipes. The soul is in Celia's hands. And when it is over, start again. I trust you. I have always trusted you. And I love you more than any recipe could ever measure. Yours always, Lorraine. I sat at that table until the coffee went cold, and the pendant light was the only brightness left in the dark house. I read all 3 pages again. Then I pressed them against my chest and whispered to the empty kitchen. I trust you too, Lorraine. I will see this through. I promise. Sitting at that table on the night of January 28th, holding Lorraine's letter, my mind pulled me backward. 8 months. She had spent 8 months building this plan while her body was failing. And it all started on a Sunday afternoon in May of 2023, at this very table, in this very chair. I came home from the restaurant around 4:30 that day. May heat in Savannah is a living thing. It wraps around you like wet cloth the moment you step outside. And by mid-afternoon, even the Spanish moss hangs limp and defeated. I had left Reggie to close up and driven home thinking about a cold shower and sweet tea on the back porch. The house was too quiet when I walked in. Lorraine's car was in the driveway, but I did not hear the radio or her humming or the sound of her knife on the cutting board. Lorraine? No answer. I found her at the kitchen table. A folded document lay open in front of her, tears running down her cheeks in 2 silent lines. She was not making a sound, just sitting there with her hand pressed flat against the paper, staring at it with an expression I had never seen in 37 years of marriage. Not fear. Something colder. Something that looked like the moment before a storm breaks. What is wrong? What happened? She looked up and those gray-brown eyes locked onto mine. Earl, she said quietly. Close the back door and sit down. She turned the document around. The header read, Magnolia Grill, Franchise Group, Preliminary Acquisition Agreement, Draft. Below that, our restaurant's address, 214 East Broughton Street. Where did you get this? Janelle left her handbag after Sunday dinner. The clasp was open. This was sticking out. I saw our restaurant's name, and I could not stop myself. I read it. Acquisition target. Estimated brand value. 6 million. Timeline. Post-bereavement window. 12 months maximum. And in the margins, penciled in Dwayne's tight handwriting. Dwayne 40%. Marcus 35. Janelle 25. Below that, a note. M does not know full scope yet. Feed him legacy angle. Easier to manage when he thinks it is his idea. They are planning to wait until you die, I said. The words came out flat, like reading someone else's script. They are going to take the restaurant while I am grieving and sell it to a chain for $6 million. And Marcus is helping them. Lorraine's voice was steady now. The tears had stopped. He does not know Dwayne plans to cut him out after the sale closes. But he knows enough. He is letting them use him because it is easier than building something himself. I wanted to drive to Atlanta that night. Find Dwayne Curtis and put my fist through his teeth. Call Marcus and scream until my throat bled. Lorraine watched me. After 37 years, she knew every expression I owned. You want to fight them, she said. Damn right I do. She shook her head. If we confront them now, Marcus denies everything. Dwayne disappears the paper trail. They wait 6 months, regroup, and come back with a plan we cannot see coming. She reached across the table and took my hands. Hers were steady, mine were shaking. We let them take exactly what they think they want, she said. I do not understand. She pulled a yellow legal pad from the stack of mail. Drew a line down the center. Left side, assets they get. Right side, assets we keep. What makes our name worth anything, Earl? The food, the recipes, the relationships you built with every supplier in this city for 35 years. Take those away, and what is left? A building with a lease and a pile of debt. Exactly. She wrote numbers on the left side. Lease. $12,500 a month. Equipment loans, $18,000 a month. Vendors, $340,000. IRS payment plan, pending lawsuit. She added them up and drew a line beneath. $3.1 million in liabilities. And on the right side, she wrote one word. Recipes. Then below it, registered intellectual property. Celia's name. You want to separate the soul from the body, I said. I want to give Marcus the body and keep the soul. Without the recipes, that restaurant is a beautiful corpse. The food is what brings people through the door. The food is what Magnolia Grill wants to buy. Without it, the brand is worthless. Marcus will be standing in an empty dining room wondering why no one comes anymore. It is cruel, Lorraine. Her jaw tightened. Dwayne Curtis is planning to exploit your grief over my death. He has a buyer lined up. He is treating our life's work like an asset to strip and flip. That is cruel. What I am proposing is a lesson. She pulled out her phone. Helen Chastain. You remember her from church? Estate law. I am calling her tomorrow. Lorraine, this is happening, Earl. Those steady eyes. I have 6 months. Maybe 12. I am not spending them watching vultures circle my family. I am spending them making sure you, Celia, and Theo are protected. And Marcus. Her voice dropped softer. Marcus will learn what it costs to take something you did not build. I sat there looking at the woman I loved. 59 years old. Stage 4. 6 months to live. And she was drawing up a battle plan at our kitchen table with the same intensity she used to develop a new recipe. Lorraine Fontaine did not make decisions lightly, but once she decided, the Lord himself could not change her course. All right, I said. We do it your way. She smiled. Small and sad and fierce. Thank you for trusting me. That night, I held her hand across that kitchen table and we planned together. I did not know then that she would be gone in 8 months. I did not know I would be sitting at this same table in January reading her letter and remembering this moment. But Lorraine knew. Even then, dying and determined, she knew exactly how this story would end. I arrived at Helen Chastain's office at 9 in the morning on January the 30th, 2 days after the Vultures came to my door and 15 days after Lorraine died. Celia met me in the parking lot, still wearing the faint smell of the kitchen from her early morning prep shift at the restaurant. She had dark circles under her eyes, but her jaw was set. She looked like her mother. We did not say much as we walked across the lot and up the steps of the old brick building on Bull Street. We were about to hand over our family's restaurant to the son who had stolen from it. All because my dead wife had spent her last 7 months building a trap. Helen's office was on the second floor. The kind of place that smelled like leather-bound books and strong coffee and decades of quiet legal work. The building dated back to 1880-something, with tall windows that looked out over the live oaks lining Bull Street and crown molding that had been repainted so many times you could see the layers if you looked close. Helen's receptionist, a young woman with box braids and a warm smile, waved us straight through. Helen stood when we entered. 62 years old, silver locks pulled back in a low bun, wearing reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She had been at our wedding, had drawn up our wills when the kids were born, had sat with Lorraine through 3 rounds of treatment at the cancer center, holding her hand and taking notes on legal pads while the chemicals dripped. Earl. Celia. She hugged us both. Her hands were steady and warm. I am sorry we are meeting under these circumstances. Sit down. I have everything ready. On her desk sat a folder. Thick, cream-colored. The tab reading Fontaine Estate Contingency Plan in typed letters. Beside it, a second folder, thinner, labeled Culinary IP Registration and Transfer. Celia stared at them. That is all, Mama? Every word. Helen sat down and opened the thick folder carefully. The way you handle something precious. Your mother came to see me on July the 22nd, 2023. 1 week after she found that contract in Janelle's bag. She worked with me for 7 months. Twice a week. Sometimes 3 times. Even when the treatments made her so tired, she could barely hold her head up. She came. She was very specific about every detail. She pulled out a stack of papers. 52 pages of documentation, legal structures, asset transfers, liability assignments, intellectual property registrations, trust documents, and one very carefully worded settlement agreement. Settlement, I said. The word felt strange in my mouth. On paper, yes. Helen's eyes met mine over her reading glasses. In reality, it is a door that only opens one way. Once Marcus walks through, he cannot walk back. She spread the key documents across her desk and picked up the first one. August 2023. Lorraine registered all culinary intellectual property with the Copyright Office. Every recipe, every technique, every menu development document, going back to 1989. 40 years of creative work, formally documented and protected under her name. She set that aside and picked up another. September 2023. The IP was transferred into the Celia Fontaine Irrevocable Trust. Upon Lorraine's death, Celia becomes sole trustee and beneficiary of all culinary intellectual property. Celia leaned forward, her brow creased. So the recipes are mine now. Legally, permanently, and irrevocably. Helen nodded. No one can take them. No court order, no conservatorship, no business transfer can touch intellectual property held in an irrevocable trust. It is separate from the restaurant entity entirely. She picked up a third document. This is the piece your mother was most proud of. The Fontaine's Table brand is contractually tied to a culinary IP licensing agreement. Whoever owns the restaurant must have a valid license to use the recipes associated with the brand. Without that license, they own a building, a lease, equipment, and debt. They own the name on the sign, but nothing that makes the name mean anything. So Marcus gets the restaurant without the recipes, I said slowly. He gets everything he asked for. Helen's voice was precise. The building, the brand, the staff, the accounts. And he gets every dollar of debt attached to them. What he does not get is the reason anyone walks through that door. The food. She pulled out the settlement document. 42 pages of dense legal language with yellow tabs marking the critical sections. This is the transfer offer. You, Earl, voluntarily relinquish operational control to Marcus. In exchange, Marcus drops any conservatorship petition, waives all future claims against you personally, and accepts the restaurant as is. No warranties. No guarantees. No representations about future profitability. And here. She flipped to a tabbed section. The assumption of liabilities clause. By accepting this transfer, Marcus personally guarantees all company debts, obligations, bonds, leases, and legal liabilities. Every payment, every vendor account, every dollar. He signs. He owns the debt, I said, every penny. And we offer him a forensic audit before signing. $30,000, 6 to 8 weeks. Standard due diligence. Helen looked up and smiled without warmth. Your mother predicted he would refuse. Dwayne will not wait 2 months and spend $30,000 when he thinks a $6 million payday is sitting right there. They will waive the audit. They will sign without looking closely. Because greed makes people impatient. Celia sat back in her chair. Mama really thought of everything. Your mother was the most thorough client I have ever had in 40 years of practice. Helen closed the folder and looked at both of us. She anticipated every argument, every loophole, every move they might make. She even predicted the exact words Marcus would use when he signed. She told me he would say something about deserving this. About Lorraine, always knowing he was the right one. Helen slid a retainer agreement across the desk. Before she died, Lorraine made me promise one thing. She made me swear I would see this through with you. That I would not let you back out. She leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. She told me, Helen, if Earl doubts himself, remind him of one thing. Marcus sold Mama Irene's gumbo recipe to strangers for $35,000 when he was 28 years old. He sold his grandmother's legacy for pocket change. A man who does that once will do it again, if you let him. The room went quiet. The old clock on the wall ticked steadily. Celia reached over and took my hand. We are trusting Mama, Dad, she said. This is what she wanted. I picked up Helen's pen. Heavy, old-fashioned, the kind that required pressure. I signed the retainer agreement. Helen would contact Graham Webb by end of week with our offer. The surrender that was not a surrender. The trap dressed as a gift. Helen nodded once. I will offer the audit. They will refuse. And then, we let them sign their own lesson. I arrived at Helen Chastain's office at 9:47 on the morning of February the 12th, 2024. 28 days since Lorraine died. The parking lot was cold, the kind of February morning in Savannah where the air smells like river, water, and old brick. Celia was already there, leaning against her car with her arms crossed, wearing a black blazer over her kitchen whites. She looked like she had not slept. Neither had I. We had spent last night at my kitchen table going over it one more time. Not the numbers. We knew the numbers by heart. But the weight of what we were about to do, handing a loaded gun to our own family and watching them point it at themselves. You ready? She asked. I was not. But I nodded anyway. Helen's conference room was on the second floor. 8-person table, dark polished wood, tall windows looking out over Bull Street and the live oaks below. The documents were already laid out. Thick stacks of paper arranged in precise order, labeled with colored tabs. Transfer agreement, asset schedule, debt disclosure, waiver of claims, personal guarantee, each stack aligned perfectly, like place settings at a formal dinner. Helen stood at the head of the table in her reading glasses, looking every bit the meticulous attorney who had spent 40 years handling family estates. She nodded at us. We took chairs on the near side. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened. Marcus walked in first. Suit that probably cost $2,500. Navy blue, gold cufflinks, shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked like a man who had already won. Janelle followed in heels that clicked against the hardwood like a metronome. Then Dwayne Curtis, buttoning his blazer, briefcase in hand, scanning the room with those calculating eyes. And finally Graham Webb, legal pad open, already writing something. They took the chairs across from us. Marcus sat directly opposite me. Our eyes met for a moment, and he smiled. Confident, eager, a boy about to unwrap a birthday present he had been demanding for months. Helen cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming. We are here to execute a voluntary transfer of operational control, ownership, and all associated assets of Fontaine's Table Restaurant, from Earl Fontaine to Marcus Fontaine. She picked up the first document. This is the transfer agreement. Earl Fontaine voluntarily relinquishes all operational control, management authority, and asset possession of Fontaine's Table, effective upon signing and notarization. She set it in front of me. Then she moved to the next stack. Asset schedule. Equipment valued at $480,000. Accounts receivable, $42,000. Cash on hand, $95,000. All assets transfer with the restaurant. Next stack. Debt disclosure. 52 pages, detailing all restaurant liabilities, lease obligations, equipment loans, vendor accounts, tax payment plans, pending litigation, insurance premiums. This document was provided to Mr. Marcus Fontaine and his counsel on February the 5th. Graham Webb nodded. Reviewed and acknowledged. Helen picked up another document. Her voice did not change, but I saw her fingers press slightly harder against the paper. Waiver of independent audit. Marcus Fontaine acknowledges receipt of all financial disclosures, voluntarily waives the right to forensic audit or third-party verification, and accepts all restaurant assets and liabilities in their current state. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Fontaine, you were offered a full forensic audit at an estimated cost of $30,000 with a 6 to 8 week timeline. You have declined this offer. Is that correct? Marcus did not hesitate. Correct. I know this restaurant. I grew up in that kitchen. I do not need an outsider telling me what I already know. Dwayne nodded. Janelle checked her phone. Helen set down the final document. Personal guarantee of liabilities. By signing this, Marcus Fontaine personally assumes full financial responsibility for all known restaurant debts, including but not limited to lease payments, equipment loans, vendor accounts, tax obligations, and pending legal claims. She paused. Let her eyes rest on Marcus for a full 3 seconds. Do you understand what you are signing? I understand, Marcus said. His voice was strong, certain. I helped build this restaurant. It is time I ran it properly. I felt Celia's hand on my shoulder. Steady. Solid. Helen slid the transfer agreement in front of me. Please, sign and date here. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled. I thought about Lorraine at that kitchen table in May, writing numbers on her legal pad, about her coming to this office twice a week for 7 months while the cancer ate her alive, about her sealing that envelope with red wax and trusting an 8-year-old boy to deliver it. I signed. Earl James Fontaine. February 12th, 2024. 10:08 a.m. Helen moved the document to Marcus. Please sign here. Acknowledging acceptance of all terms. Marcus signed with a flourish. Fast, confident. The pen barely pausing between letters. No hesitation. No second thoughts. Like a man signing an autograph. The waiver came next. Signed. The personal guarantee. Signed. The debt disclosure acknowledgement. Signed. 52 pages of liabilities, and he put his name to them in less than 4 seconds. Helen gathered all documents, stamped the final page, notarized it with her seal. As of 10:19 a.m., on February the 12th, 2024, Fontaine's Table Restaurant is under the full ownership and operational control of Marcus Fontaine. All assets, contracts, and obligations transfer effective immediately. Janelle stood and hugged Dwayne. Her phone was already out, snapping a selfie with Marcus in front of the conference table. Celebrating. Graham Webb pulled out an invoice and slid it to Marcus. Legal fees, $6,200. Half due today. Marcus did not flinch. He was too busy grinning. Mama always said this kitchen was meant for me, he said, turning to look at me across the table. She knew I was the one who could take it to the next level. Celia's grip tightened on my shoulder. I could feel her pulse through her fingers, fast and hard. I stood. Did not offer my hand. Neither did Celia. Congratulations, I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. We walked out. Down the stairs, across the lobby, through the glass door into the February morning. The air hit my face, and I realized I had been holding my breath for the last 10 minutes. In the parking lot, Celia stopped beside her car. Her eyes were red but dry. Dad. Her voice was tight. Did we just do the right thing? I looked back up at the second-floor window. Through the glass, I could see Marcus still in the conference room, gesturing with his hands, laughing. Dwayne clapping him on the back, already planning. Already dividing up what they thought was a fortune. Your mother spent 7 months building this plan while she was dying, I said slowly. She worked with Helen twice a week when she should have been resting. She did this to protect you and Theo. So yes. Celia, we did the right thing. Celia nodded once. Got in her car. Drove away toward Tybee Island, where in 6 weeks she would open a small restaurant with her mother's recipes and zero debt and a name that meant everything. I sat in my truck for a long time, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. The first payment was due in 30 days, $18,200. Marcus had $95,000 in the bank, 5 payments before the money ran out. And that was before vendors, payroll, lease, insurance, and the IRS. Lorraine had built the clock. Marcus had just started it ticking. Reggie Boudreau called me on March the 5th at 11:22 in the morning. 3 weeks and 1 day since Marcus signed those papers. I was in the backyard pulling dead basil stalks from the raised beds Lorraine had built 6 years ago. She had planted the garden herself, hauling soil and cedar planks on a Saturday morning while I was at the restaurant. Thai basil, purple basil, rosemary, thyme, mint, 3 kinds of peppers. She said a cook who did not grow something was just a technician following instructions. The phone buzzed in my back pocket. I pulled off my gardening glove and looked at the screen. Reggie. I wiped the dirt on my jeans and answered, Earl. His voice was tight, the way it sounded when a vendor shorted us or a line cook dropped a full stock pot during Friday rush. I am done. I quit this morning. I had known it was coming. Matthew had told me. Celia had told me. But hearing it from Reggie's mouth, the man who had stood at that pulpit 6 weeks ago and told 200 people about Lorraine teaching him to make gumbo 41 times, that hit different. Tell me what happened, I said. I sat down on the garden bench, the one under the crepe myrtle, where Lorraine used to sit in the evenings and shell butter beans. 3 weeks, Earl. That is all it took. Reggie's breath was heavy. 3 weeks. And that boy has gutted everything your wife built. Everything. Start from the beginning. The beginning was day 3. Marcus brought in some consultant from Atlanta. Calls himself a culinary brand strategist. 32 years old. Never worked a line in his life. Wears a turtleneck and talks about food identity and market positioning like he is selling cars instead of feeding people. First thing this man does is look at our menu, The menu Lorraine spent 35 years perfecting and says it is dated. Says Cajun Creole is oversaturated in the Savannah market. Says we need to pivot to Southern fusion. Southern fusion, I repeated. Reggie made a sound that was half laugh, half growl. Deconstructed shrimp and grits with truffle foam. Collard green spring rolls with ponzu dipping sauce. Blackened redfish tacos with mango salsa. He threw out Lorraine's entire menu in one meeting. Earl, 35 years of recipes gone. Replaced with nonsense a food truck would be embarrassed to serve. I closed my eyes. The March sun was warm on my face, but I felt cold inside. And Marcus approved this? Marcus was grinning the whole time. Kept saying things like, "This is the evolution Mama never had the vision for." Evolution. He called truffle foam on shrimp and grits. Evolution. What about the regulars? Reggie was quiet for a moment. That is why I quit. The Hendersons came in Tuesday night. Earl, they have eaten at Fontaine's table every Tuesday for 22 years. Lorraine used to have their gumbo started before they walked through the door. They ordered the gumbo. We do not have gumbo anymore. We have Cajun spiced bisque with micro cilantro. Mrs. Henderson tasted it, and her face just fell, like someone had told her a person she loved had died. They paid. They left. They have not come back. He paused. I checked the Yelp reviews this morning. We were at 4.7 stars for 9 years straight. 3 weeks under Marcus, we are at 3.2 and dropping. 47 new reviews, and 39 of them say the same thing. This is not Fontaine's anymore. Where is the real food? What happened to this place? How many cooks are left? 4 of the 5-line cooks walked out this week. The consultant told them to plate portions smaller for visual aesthetics. Desiree left yesterday. Said she would not put her name on pastry she did not believe in. That leaves 2 prep cooks and a dishwasher. Marcus tried to hire replacements through a staffing agency. Got 3 temp workers who have never made a roux in their lives. I sat on that bench and felt the weight of what was happening. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a heavy, tired sadness. The restaurant Lorraine and I had built over 35 years was being hollowed out from the inside. The body was still standing on East Broughton Street, but the soul had already left the building. Reggie, I said, I appreciate you telling me. There is more. He lowered his voice. Marcus called me into the office yesterday. Asked me if I knew where Lorraine kept her recipes, the original cards. He said the consultant needs them to build what he called inspired iterations. I told him I did not know. He got angry. Said I was lying. Said I had been her right hand for 25 years. And there was no way I did not know where the recipes were. What did you tell him? I told him the truth. That Lorraine's recipes belonged to Lorraine, and Lorraine gave them to who she trusted. He did not like that answer. I bet he did not. Then this morning Marcus called me at 6 a.m., asked me to come back, offered me a raise. A raise. Earl, the restaurant is bleeding out, and he is offering raises to people who are running for the exits. I sat there in the garden, surrounded by herbs Lorraine had planted, and felt the plan working exactly as she had drawn it on that yellow legal pad. Without the recipes, the food changes. When the food changes, the customers leave. When the customers leave, the revenue dies. And when the revenue dies, the debt eats everything. Reggie, I said, I cannot ask you to stay, but I can tell you this. Celia is opening something new. Small place out on Tybee Island. Her mother's recipes. Clean start. When the dust settles, give her a call. I will be there, Earl. You know I will. I just wish it had not come to this. So do I. After we hung up, I sat in the garden for a long time. A mockingbird sang from the crepe myrtle overhead. The same tree where Lorraine used to sit. I could almost hear her voice. Gentle, but firm. Do not interfere, Earl. Let the math do what I cannot do anymore. That evening, Helen called me. Short and direct. Marcus contacted Dwayne today, panicking about the reviews and the staff leaving. Wanted Dwayne to bring in emergency funding to hire new cooks and rebrand the menu again. What did Dwayne say? 3 words. Fix it yourself. Helen paused. Earl. Dwayne is pulling back. When a man like that stops returning calls, it means he has seen the numbers and decided the investment is not worth saving. Marcus is on his own now. I hung up. Walked inside. Sat at the kitchen table. Lorraine's chair across from me. Still empty. Still holding the shape of her. 3 weeks. Lorraine had predicted 90 to 120 days. But the soul had already left the building, and without it, the body was collapsing faster than even she had estimated. I drove past Fontaine's table on Saturday night, April the 15th. I did not plan to. I was heading home from the hardware store on Whitaker Street, picking up hooks for the herb drying rack Celia had asked me to build for her new kitchen. The route took me down Broughton Street, and when I saw the building, I slowed without thinking. The parking lot was empty. Saturday night, 8:15 in the evening, peak dinner hour. For 35 years, Saturday at Fontaine's table meant a line out the door by 6:30. It meant the Jackson Square Trio playing live jazz on the small stage by the bar. It meant Lorraine in her white chef's coat greeting every table by name, remembering anniversaries and birthdays and dietary restrictions and which child had just lost a tooth. It meant the kitchen running full tilt, 8 burners flaming, Reggie calling orders, the beautiful controlled chaos of a restaurant doing what it was born to do. Now the lot held 3 cars. Through the front window, I could see maybe 4 tables occupied out of 22. A server stood near the host stand, arms crossed, staring at her phone. No music. No line. No Lorraine. I did not stop. Just let my truck idle past at 5 miles an hour, taking in the quiet death of something my wife and I had spent 35 years building. Then I pressed the gas and drove on. The weeks that followed unfolded exactly as Lorraine had written on that yellow legal pad. Like watching dominoes fall in the exact sequence she had lined them up. Week 5. Helen forwarded me an email from Graham Webb. Marcus had asked the remaining staff to accept reduced hours and delayed paychecks until what he called the restructuring took hold. 2 of the 3 remaining kitchen workers walked out. The dishwasher stayed because he had nowhere else to go. Week 6. Tybee Fresh Seafood, our supplier for 30 years, switched Marcus to cash-only terms. Earl Jr., the owner, called me personally to apologize. Mr. Fontaine, I am sorry, he said, but I heard what is happening over there, and I cannot extend credit to someone I do not trust to pay. Your word was gold for 3 decades. Your son has not earned that. Without credit from Tybee Fresh, Marcus could not order shrimp, crab, oysters, or any of the Gulf seafood that Savannah diners expected from a restaurant with our name on it. Week 7. The Savannah Morning News published a review. I read it at the kitchen table with my coffee, the same table where Lorraine had planned all of this. The headline read, "Fontaine's table has lost its soul." The reviewer wrote, "For 35 years, Fontaine's table was more than a restaurant. It was a covenant between a family and a city. Lorraine Fontaine fed Savannah with love, heritage, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity. What remains under new management is unrecognizable. The menu is confused. The service is hollow. The food tastes like it was designed by committee rather than cooked by someone who cared. Fontaine's table has not just changed. It has forgotten what it was. 2 stars. I set the paper down and stared at Lorraine's empty chair across from me. 2 stars. We had held 4.5 for 9 years straight. Lorraine would have burned the building down herself before she let it fall to 2 stars. Week 8. Helen called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was careful, measured, the way lawyers sound when they are delivering news they know will land hard. Earl, Marcus is using personal credit cards to cover vendor payments and the lease shortfall. 3 cards, $22,000 at 21%, $18,000 at 23%. 22,000 at 19.9. Total credit card debt, $62,000. 62,000 in high-interest debt. On top of the equipment loans, the vendor accounts, the IRS payment plan, and the lease. I did the math in my head. Marcus was adding 17% interest charges to an already sinking ship, like bailing water with a cup that had holes in it. And the lease? I asked. 12 days past due. The landlord sent a formal notice. Marcus has 7 days to pay, or they begin eviction proceedings. That same evening, my phone rang again. Helen. Her voice was different. This time. Shorter. Dwayne Curtis called Graham Webb this afternoon. Officially withdrew from any involvement with Fontaine's table. And Earl. He told Graham to relay a message to Marcus. The Magnolia Grill deal is dead. No recipes, no intellectual property, no deal. There is nothing to sell. The $6 million payday that Dwayne had been chasing for 2 years had just evaporated. Without the IP, without Lorraine's recipes legally attached to the brand, Magnolia Grill had nothing to buy. The name Fontaine's Table without Fontaine's food was just 5 syllables on a sign above a door nobody walked through anymore. I thanked Helen and hung up. Made myself dinner. Nothing fancy. Rice and beans and a piece of cornbread from the batch Celia had dropped off yesterday. Ate it at the kitchen table in the quiet. At 11:14 that night, my phone rang one more time. Marcus. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Dad. His voice was different. The confidence was gone. The businessman polish was gone. What remained was something raw and ragged, like a man who had been running for weeks and finally realized there was no finish line ahead, only more road. Dad, I am drowning. I need help. The reviews are killing us. The suppliers will not extend credit. Dwayne is not returning my calls. I cannot make payroll next week. I cannot make the lease payment. I do not know what to do. I sat in the dark kitchen and listened to my son fall apart over the phone. The same son who had walked into Helen's conference room 63 days ago, grinning like he had conquered the world. The same son who had said, Mama always knew this kitchen was meant for me. I was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Marcus said, Dad? Are you there? I am here, son. Please. His voice cracked. I need you to help me. Tell me what to do. I thought about Lorraine. About her sitting across from me in that hospital bed. Too weak to lift her head. Strong enough to grip my wrist and say, do not interfere. Let the math teach him what I cannot. Marcus, I said softly. I love you, but I cannot save you from this one. This is something you have to learn yourself. Silence. Then a sound like a breath being punched out of a body. Then the line went dead. I sat in the dark for a long time after that. Lorraine's chair empty across from me. The house silent, except for the ticking of the hallway clock. 63 days. She had predicted 90 to 120. The collapse was running ahead of schedule, and there was nothing I could do but let gravity finish what she started. Helen called me at 8:03 on the morning of May the 18th. 96 days since Marcus signed those papers in her conference room. I was making coffee in the percolator, watching it gurgle and hiss the way it had every morning for 12 years, when her name lit up my phone. Earl. It is done. Marcus filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy this morning through Graham Webb's office. I set down the coffee mug. Sat at the kitchen table. The same table where all of this had started, and where all of it seemed to end. 96 days. I said. Lorraine predicted 90 to 120. Helen's voice held no satisfaction. Just the flat, careful tone of a woman delivering facts. She was off by 3 weeks on the optimistic end. Tell me the rest. The restaurant closed permanently on May the 1st. Landlord filed eviction on April 28th for non-payment. Equipment was seized and auctioned on May the 10th. Brought in $180,000, which covered roughly a third of the equipment loan balance. The lender is pursuing Marcus personally for the shortfall. She paused. I could hear her turning pages. Total personal liability, after the bankruptcy clears the corporate debts, $420,000. That includes the equipment loan shortfall at $240,000, lease break penalty at $85,000, credit card debt at $62,000, remaining vendor accounts at $33,000. And the IRS has filed a lien for the missed payment plan, penalty, and interest. $420,000. That number sat in my chest like a stone. My son owed $420,000 because he had signed papers without reading them, refused an audit because he was too proud, and believed he deserved something he had never built. What about Dwayne? I asked. Gone. Helen said the word like closing a door. Disconnected his phone. Graham Webb says Janelle cannot reach him either. He took no legal liability because his name was never on any document. He was a consultant. Advisory only. He walked away clean. Of course he did. Dwayne Curtis had been the architect, but he had made sure Marcus held the hammer, and every nail went through Marcus's hands alone. And the building? For lease sign went up yesterday. I drove past it this morning. Helen was quiet for a moment. Earl, it is strange seeing it dark. I remember eating there, with my husband, on our 25th anniversary. Lorraine sent out a complimentary dessert because she remembered. I remembered too. Lorraine remembered every anniversary. She kept a notebook behind the host stand with dates and names and favorite dishes. 26 years of celebrations documented in her careful handwriting. That notebook was probably in a dumpster now. After Helen hung up, I poured my coffee and sat with it growing cold. Somewhere across this city, my son was staring at a bankruptcy filing and trying to understand how he had gone from signing ownership papers with a flourish to owing nearly $500,000 in 96 days. 2 weeks later, Janelle filed for legal separation. Celia told me. She heard it from a mutual friend at church. Janelle packed her things, drove to Atlanta, moved in with Dwayne. She left Theo with Marcus. Did not fight for custody. Did not ask for visitation. Just left. Like the boy was furniture, she no longer needed in her new apartment. That part, I had not expected. Lorraine's plan had accounted for the financial collapse, for Dwayne's retreat, for Marcus losing the restaurant. But she had not written anything about Janelle abandoning her own son. Maybe she had predicted it and chosen not to put it on paper. Or maybe even Lorraine could not have imagined a mother walking away from an 8-year-old boy because his father's bank account hit zero. Marcus found a studio apartment in Thunderbolt, the small community just east of Savannah where the marshes meet the river. $875 a month, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette the size of a closet, and a shared laundry room. He and Theo shared the single bed for the first 2 weeks until Marcus found a used bunk bed on the marketplace for $120 and borrowed a truck to haul it home. On June the 2nd, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer. Hello, Earl. Janelle's voice. She had been crying. You did this on purpose. You and Lorraine planned this whole thing. You gave Marcus that restaurant, knowing it would destroy him. I had been expecting this call. Dreading it, maybe, but not surprised. Janelle, I said. I know about the contract with Magnolia Grill. $6 million. Dwayne, 40%. Marcus, 35%. You, 25%. I have a copy of the draft agreement that was in your handbag in May of 2023. Silence. Lorraine found it. I continued. She spent her last 7 months making sure that when your people came to take what she built, they would get exactly what they deserved. A restaurant worth -$3 million that could not survive a single quarter without the recipes and relationships your family never bothered to understand. We are going to lose everything, Janelle whispered. Marcus cannot even afford groceries some weeks. Theo keeps asking why we moved. Why his mama left. Where were you when Lorraine was dying? I asked quietly. Where was Marcus when she took her last breath? Where was your brother when he was planning to sell my wife's life's work to a fast food chain before her body was cold? No answer. You chose Dwayne's plan over this family. And now Dwayne is in Atlanta with a disconnected phone and no legal liability. You left your son with a man you helped bankrupt. Do not call me looking for sympathy, Janelle. I am fresh out. She hung up. That evening, I drove to Thunderbolt. I did not decide to go until I was already driving. The studio was on the second floor of a small complex near the marsh, the kind of place that smelled like salt water and pine and someone else's cooking through thin walls. Marcus's truck was in the lot, dusty and dented. I parked across the street and looked up at the window. The curtains were thin, and the light inside made silhouettes. Marcus sat on a worn couch. Theo was beside him, curled up against his father's side. The television played something with bright colors. A cartoon. And Marcus had his arm around his son, his phone nowhere in sight. Just sitting there, being present in a way I had not seen in 12 years. I watched for maybe 3 minutes. Then I started the truck and drove away without knocking. Lorraine's plan was not revenge. It was never revenge. It was about stripping everything away until all that remained was what actually mattered. And looking through that window, seeing my son hold his boy with nothing else left in the world, I hoped maybe he was starting to understand what that was. While Marcus was drowning, Celia was building. I need to take you back to April the 1st. 2024. 7 weeks after the signing. While Fontaine's table was bleeding customers and Marcus was watching his Yelp rating collapse, Celia Fontaine opened the doors of a small restaurant on Tybrisa Street, Tybee Island, Georgia, 22 minutes from downtown Savannah. A different world entirely. The building had been a bait shop in a former life. Single story. Cinder block walls painted white. A tin roof that drummed when it rained. Celia had found it in February while driving the island, looking for commercial space she could afford without taking on debt. The landlord was a retired shrimper named Wallace, who charged $2,000 a month and did not ask questions about what she planned to cook. She gutted it in 3 weeks. Tore out the bait tanks and fish counters herself with a crowbar and a sledgehammer, hauled the debris to the dump in a borrowed pickup, laid reclaimed heart pine floors she found at a salvage yard in Pooler, built the bar from old dock planks sanded smooth enough to rest your elbows on, hung string lights from the exposed ceiling beams, kept the walls white and bare except for one thing, a framed black and white photograph of Lorraine at 24, standing in the kitchen of the original Fontaine's table in 1989, apron on, wooden spoon in hand, grinning, like she had already won. 40 seats. Open kitchen. No tablecloths. No pretension. The menu, handwritten on a chalkboard behind the bar in Celia's neat print. 12 items. Mama Irene's shrimp and grits. Lorraine's she-crab soup. Blackened redfish with dirty rice. Fried catfish po' boy. Crawfish étouffée. Low country boil. Smothered pork chops. Red beans and rice on Mondays. Collard greens. Buttermilk cornbread. Peach cobbler with brown butter crust. Sweet tea by the pitcher. Every recipe from the box. Every flavor Lorraine had spent 40 years perfecting. Every dish cooked the way Mama Irene taught Lorraine, and Lorraine taught Celia. No fusion, no deconstruction, no truffle foam. Just food made with patience and love and hands that knew what they were doing. Celia used $400,000 from the life insurance payout to open. Paid cash for everything. Commercial stove, walk-in cooler, tables, chairs, plates, silverware. Zero debt. Zero loans. Zero investors. Clean as a whistle. Lorraine would have approved. Reggie Boudreau started as head chef on day 1. He had called Celia the morning after he quit Fontaine's table and said 3 words. When do I start? She hired him at $26 an hour. More than Marcus had been paying. Because she believed loyalty deserved a raise, not a pay cut. They opened soft. No advertising. No social media announcement. No grand opening party. Just unlocked the door at 5 in the evening on April the 1st. And waited. 14 people came that first night. Locals. Island folks who had seen the construction and smelled the roux through the open windows. They sat at the bar and at the small tables and ordered off the chalkboard, and when the food came out, I watched their faces. I was there, sitting at the corner table by the window, the one with the view of the dunes and the ocean beyond. I had arrived at 4:30 to help Celia set up, but she had waved me off. "Just sit, Dad. Be here." That is enough. So I sat, drank chicory coffee from a white ceramic mug, and when folks came in, I greeted them the way Lorraine used to. By name, if I knew them. By handshake, if I did not. "Welcome to Lorraine's kitchen," I would say. "My daughter is cooking tonight. You are going to love it." That first week, word moved quietly. 14 covers Monday. 22 Tuesday. By Saturday, every seat was full, and people were waiting on the sidewalk. By May, the Savannah magazine food writer drove out to the island. Her review ran in the June issue. The headline read, "The soul of Fontaine's lives on, 22 minutes from where it died," she wrote. In a converted bait shop on Tybee Island, Celia Fontaine is doing something remarkable. She is cooking her mother's food with her mother's recipes and her mother's philosophy. And she is doing it without pretense, without shortcuts, and without apology. If you loved Fontaine's Table for what it was, before it became what it is now, drive to Tybee. Lorraine is still there. You just have to know where to look. After that review, the phone did not stop ringing. June, July, August. Waitlist stretched to 2 weeks. Revenue hit $74,000 in July alone. By September, Celia hired 3 more cooks, a second server, and a prep assistant. 8 employees total. All paid fairly. All treated with respect. The way Lorraine would have done it. Year-end projection. $890,000 in revenue. 0 debt. Full tables every night. A waiting list that grew longer every week. I went every morning at 7. Sat at my corner table. Drank my coffee. Read the paper. And when the first customers arrived for lunch, I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and welcomed them in. It was the only job I wanted. The only legacy I needed. Being present in a room where my wife's recipe still lived. On a Tuesday morning in mid-May, I was at my table, reading the Savannah Morning News, when I felt someone watching me. I looked up toward the front window. Marcus stood on the sidewalk outside, hands in the pockets of a worn jacket. He was thinner than I remembered, tired-looking, in jeans and work boots and a faded t-shirt. He stood there, staring through the glass at the chalkboard menu, at Reggie visible through the kitchen pass, at me, sitting at my corner table with my coffee. Our eyes met through the window. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Enough time for me to see something in his face that was not anger, was not resentment, was something closer to hunger. Not for food, for belonging. Then he turned and walked away down Tybrisa Street, hands still in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the morning salt breeze. I did not stand up, did not call after him, did not follow. Some doors a man has to decide to walk through on his own. Lorraine taught me that. The call came on a Thursday in early June. Celia told me about it that evening when she stopped by the house to drop off a container of she-crab soup. "Marcus called me today," she said. She set the soup on the counter and leaned against the kitchen door frame with her arms crossed. The same posture Lorraine used when she had something important to say and wanted you to pay attention. "What did he say?" She was quiet for a moment. "He said, 'I know I do not deserve to ask, but I need work. Anything. Dishes. Floors. Whatever you have. I will take whatever you give me.'" I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, looking at my daughter. "What did you tell him?" I told him $14 an hour. Dishwasher. 5:30 a.m. start. No special treatment. No family discount on expectations. He shows up on time, or he does not show up at all. And he said yes. Starts Monday. Monday came. I did not go to the restaurant that morning. Felt like something Marcus needed to do without his father watching. But Celia called me at noon. He was here at 5:15, she said. 15 minutes early. Apron on. Did not say a word to anyone except good morning. Washed dishes for 6 straight hours without a break. His hands were raw when he left. That was the beginning. I watched it unfold over the months that followed. Not closely. Not hovering. But I was at my corner table most mornings, and I saw things. Small things that added up like ingredients in a recipe you did not realize you were making. The first month was dishes. Nothing but dishes. Pots crusted with roux. Sheet pans black with roasted vegetables. The industrial sprayer that soaked your shirt, and the steam that made your face drip, and the bleach that cracked your skin until it bled at the knuckles. Marcus did it without complaint. Arrived at 5:30. Left after 10. Most nights. His hands turned raw and red, then calloused and hard. The blisters came and broke and came again until his palms looked like they belonged to a man who had worked his whole life instead of a man who had spent the last decade in suits. The second month, Celia moved him to prep. Chopping onions, peeling shrimp, dicing celery for the Holy Trinity. The work was faster, more demanding, required precision Lorraine would have appreciated. 8 pounds of onions cut uniform, 5 pounds of shrimp deveined without tearing the flesh. Marcus stood at that prep station from 6 in the morning until the lunch rush ended, and his back screamed and his eyes burned from onion vapors, and he did not say a word about any of it. By month 4, Celia put him on the line. Lowest position, frying station, catfish, and hush puppies, and fried okra. The fryer spat oil that left burns on his forearms like constellations. He wore those burns without complaint. Wore them like something earned. Reggie did not make it easy. For the first 3 months, he barely looked at Marcus. Would not speak to him beyond kitchen commands. Behind, he would bark when passing. Yes, chef, Marcus would answer. Every single time. No attitude. No pushback. Just yes, chef. But around month 5, something shifted. I was at my corner table on a September morning when I heard Reggie's voice from the kitchen. Louder than usual, but not angry. Different. Fontaine, come here. Marcus appeared at the pass, wiping his hands on his apron. You see this roux? Reggie pointed at a cast-iron pot on the stove. The color of a copper penny, the surface barely shimmering. This is your mama's roux. 30 minutes. Medium-low heat. Constant stirring. No shortcuts. No walking away. You stand here, and you stir, and you watch the color change. Can you do that? Yes, chef. Your mama taught me this in '99. Took me 41 tries before I got it right. You are starting at try number 1. If I taste it and it is wrong, you start over. You understand? Yes, chef. I watched Marcus stand at that stove for 34 minutes, stirring without stopping, his eyes fixed on the color of the roux as it deepened from blonde to gold to copper. When he slid the pot off the heat and Reggie tasted it with a clean spoon, the older man stood there for a long time without saying anything. Then he nodded once. Again tomorrow. Same time. And he walked away. That was how it went. Reggie teaching. Marcus learning. Not with praise or encouragement, but with repetition and silence and the occasional nod that meant more than any compliment. Month 8. Celia raised Marcus to $16 an hour. He did not ask for it. She offered, and he said thank you and went back to his station. Month 12. $18 an hour. Celia offered 20. Marcus shook his head. I will earn the 20th, he said. Ask me again in 3 months. Through all of it, Theo. Every morning, Marcus drove his son to school at 7:45 before heading to the restaurant. Every afternoon at 3:15, he left the kitchen, picked Theo up, helped with homework at a table in the back of the restaurant while Celia prepped for dinner service. Then back on the line at 5, Theo would sit at the bar, eating cornbread and doing math worksheets until Marcus's shift ended at 10. They drove home together. Every night. Not a single missed day. I watched my son become someone I had not seen in 20 years. Maybe someone he had never been. Quiet, patient, present. His hands calloused from honest work. His ego burned away by months of yes, chef, and starting over and standing at a hot stove without recognition. On an evening in August of 2025, 14 months after Marcus started washing dishes, Reggie found me at my corner table. After closing, he pulled up a chair and sat down heavy, the way a man does after a 12-hour shift on concrete floors. "Earl," he said, "I need to tell you something." I set down my coffee. "What is it?" "That boy made Lorraine's she crab soup today. Start to finish. Crab stock, cream reduction, sherry, everything. I did not help. Did not say a word. Just watched him work." Reggie paused, rubbed his face with both hands. "And I tasted it. And Earl, I swear on everything I love, it was hers. Exact. Not close. Not almost. Hers. Like she was standing right there beside him, guiding his hands." His voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat and stood up. 14 months ago, I would not have trusted that boy to boil water. Today, he made his mama's soup and I could not tell the difference. She would be proud of him, Earl. I believe that. He walked back to the kitchen. I sat at my table in the empty restaurant, the string lights glowing softly overhead, the ocean murmuring outside the windows, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt Lorraine smiling. It was a Thursday night in late August, 2025. 14 months since Marcus started washing dishes. The restaurant had been closed for an hour. The kitchen wiped down and quiet. I had gone home early that evening. But Celia stayed. She always stayed latest. She told me what happened the next morning, over coffee at my kitchen table. And Marcus filled in the rest weeks later. So, I will tell it the way it was, pieced together from both of them. Marcus was alone in the kitchen at 9:45, wiping down the stainless steel counter beside the grill, running a clean towel along the edges the way Reggie had taught him. The kitchen smelled like the ghost of that evening's service, garlic and butter, and the faint sweetness of peach cobbler. He heard footsteps. Looked up. Celia stood at the pass, still in her chef's coat. In her hands she held an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with red wax. "Mama left this for you," she said quietly. "She gave it to me the same week she gave Dad his. She said I would know when you were ready." She set it on the counter. "I think you are ready, Marcus. I have watched you for 14 months. You show up. You work. You do not complain. End of you. End of you. And tonight you made Mama's she crab soup." And Reggie could not tell the difference. "If that does not make you ready, nothing does." She turned and walked out. The screen door creaked shut behind her. Marcus stood alone with the envelope, his name in Lorraine's slanted handwriting. For Marcus, when he remembers who he was before he forgot, dated July the 18th, 2023. He told me later he stood 5 minutes before touching it. Said his hands shook so badly he sat down on the floor, back against the cooler, legs stretched on the tiles. The letter was 3 pages. Blue ink. Lorraine's handwriting. "My sweet boy Marcus. If you are reading this, 2 things have happened. I am gone. And you have finally shown up. Not to my deathbed. You missed that. Not to my funeral on time. You were 30 minutes late in a suit that cost more than most of my line cooks make in a month. But here. Now. To this moment. So maybe there is hope. I am not writing this to punish you, baby. I am writing because I love you too much to watch you destroy yourself. You sold Mama Irene's gumbo recipe to strangers for $35,000. You sold your grandmother's soul for pocket change. Then you spent 12 years believing you deserved things you never earned. A restaurant you never helped create. So I built you a trap. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted to save you. I knew about Dwayne. I knew about the Magnolia Grill contract. I knew Janelle's brother was using you like a key to a lock he planned to throw away. You did not see it because you did not want to see it. You chose easy, over-earned, baby. You always did. But I remember you at 8 years old standing on a chair beside me, stirring roux until your little arm ached. I told you to take a break and you said, "No, Mama." You said, "Constant stirring. I am not stopping." I remember you at 12. Grinding peppercorns by hand because I told you the flavor was different when you did it yourself. That boy is still in you. He just got buried under pride and shortcuts. And people who told you that taking is the same as earning. This letter is your real inheritance. Not money, not a building. A lesson. Nothing you do not build yourself can ever truly belong to you. If Celia hired you, work harder than anyone. If Theo still loves you, become the father he deserves. If your father will still speak to you, spend the rest of your life earning back his trust. A recipe is not just ingredients, baby. It is love measured in patience and earned through showing up every morning before the sun. It is your son watching you choose hard over easy. It is your sister trusting you with her kitchen. It is your father's hand on your shoulder. That is your inheritance. The chance to become the man I always believed was hiding inside the boy who used to stand on a chair and stir my roux. I love you, Marcus. Become him. Please. Your mama. Marcus cried in a way he told me he had not cried since he was a child. Not quiet tears. The kind that shakes your whole body and makes sounds you did not know were inside you. Theo found him. The boy had been doing homework at the back table, waiting for his father's shift to end. 9 years old, barefoot because he had kicked off his shoes hours ago. He did not ask what was wrong. He climbed into his father's lap on that kitchen floor and wrapped his thin arms around Marcus's neck. Marcus buried his face in his son's hair and held him like he was the last solid thing in the world. Celia called me at 10:15. "Dad, come to the restaurant." Now. I drove. 10 minutes from Jones Street to Tybee in the dark. When I walked through the back door, I found them on the floor, Marcus holding Theo. The letter spread on the tiles beside them. Marcus looked up at me, his face stripped of every wall he had ever built. I knelt down, put my hand on his shoulder, felt him shaking. "She always loved you, son," I said, "even when she was toughest on you." "Especially then." He nodded, could not speak, just held Theo tighter. We stayed like that for a long time, the three of us on the kitchen floor. Lorraine's words around us like grace. The next morning, Marcus's alarm went off at 4:45. For the first time in 20 years, he did not hit snooze. He was at the restaurant before Reggie, before Celia, before the sun came up over the Atlantic. He made a pot of coffee, tied his apron, and started the roux. I set the table for 5 on a Sunday afternoon in mid-September. 2025. Lorraine's china. The cream-colored plates with the thin gold rim she had bought at an estate sale in 1993 and kept in the glass front cabinet in the dining room for 32 years. She had used them exactly 11 times. Thanksgiving. Christmas. The night Celia graduated culinary school. The night we paid off the restaurant's first equipment loan. She said beautiful things deserve to be used for beautiful moments, and only beautiful moments. I washed each plate by hand, dried them with a soft cloth, and set them around the oak table. She had refinished herself in the summer of '92. 5 settings, 5 chairs. A number that used to be 4 for decades, then 3 for a long time. And now, somehow, 5 again. The menu was Lorraine's Sunday dinner, the one she had cooked nearly every week for 38 years. Fried catfish, soaked in buttermilk overnight, and dredged in seasoned cornmeal. Collard greens braised 4 hours with smoked ham hock. Buttermilk cornbread baked in a cast-iron skillet until the crust crackled. And peach cobbler with brown butter crust for dessert. I had made it all myself. Took me since 6 that morning. Nothing was as good as Lorraine's, but it was close enough to remember her by. Celia arrived first at 4:30. She wore a loose dress over her growing belly. 5 months along now. She carried a jar of homemade sweet tea and a basket of dinner rolls that Reggie had sent along. She is not even here. And she is still feeding people, Celia said, setting the tea on the counter. Marcus and Theo came 10 minutes later. Marcus carried a pie dish covered in foil. Pecan pie, he said, setting it on the counter beside Celia's tea. I made it from scratch. It is not as good as Mama's. But I tried. Theo ran straight to the table. His eyes went wide. Grandpa? Are those Grandma's fancy plates? They are, buddy. Does that mean today is special? It does. He grinned and climbed into the chair that had been Lorraine's. I did not stop him. It felt right. Something about a child filling the space where grief used to sit. We ate. The catfish crackled between our teeth. The collards were rich and smoky, tender enough to melt. The cornbread steamed when you broke it open, and the butter pooled gold in the center. Theo ate 2 pieces of cobbler before anyone could object, peach juice running down his chin. Halfway through the meal, Celia set down her fork and looked around the table. I want to talk business for a minute, she said. Marcus straightened. I nodded. Lorraine's kitchen. Year 1 numbers. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. $890,000 in revenue. 0 debt. 8 employees, all paid above market rate. Full tables every service. Waitlist averages 12 days. We are projecting $950,000 for year 2, and I am adding patio seating in November. 10 more covers. She looked at Marcus. You have been with us 15 months. You show up before dawn. You work harder than anyone on the crew. Reggie trusts you. The staff respects you. So I am making you an offer. Marcus's face went still. Listening. 3 more years of this. Same work, same commitment, same showing up. And at the end of those 3 years, you earn 5% equity in Lorraine's kitchen. Not a gift. Not because you are my brother. Because you built it. Because you earned it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the plate in front of him. At Lorraine's china with the gold rim. At his son, sitting in his mother's chair, eating cobbler. I appreciate it, he said. But I will not take it until I have proven I deserve it. Ask me again in 3 years. If I am still here, still earning it, then we will talk. Celia smiled. Fair enough. Theo looked up from his cobbler. What does equity mean? It means your daddy might own a little piece of this restaurant someday, Celia said. If he keeps working hard. Theo looked at Marcus with something bright in his eyes. Like Grandma's restaurant? Like Grandma's restaurant, Marcus said. But only the part I earn myself. Theo nodded solemnly. Like he understood something important without being able to name it yet. Then he turned to me. Grandpa, tell me how Grandma started cooking. Mama says she was younger than Daddy when she opened her first restaurant. I leaned back in my chair and felt Lorraine's presence in the room, in the china, in the food, in the faces of her children and her grandchild, gathered around her table. Your grandma was 26 years old, I said. 1986. Our church, First African Baptist, was doing a fundraiser for the new roof. They needed somebody to cook for 200 people. Nobody volunteered because nobody had the money to buy that much food. Your grandma had $47 in her checking account. That was it. But she went to the fish market and bought whatever they had cheap. Catfish, shrimp, scraps. Went to the produce stand and bought onions and peppers and celery. Made 200 bowls of gumbo out of $47 and sheer stubbornness. What happened? Theo asked. Sold every bowl for $5 each. Made $890 profit in one afternoon. Used that money to buy her first commercial stove from a man selling it out of his garage in Thunderbolt. I looked around the table. At Celia, who had Lorraine's steady hands. At Marcus, who was finally learning what those hands had always known. At Theo, leaning forward like every word mattered. She built everything from that one pot of gumbo. I said, $47 and faith. That is what legacy means. Not what you are given, what you make. Marcus reached over and put his hand on Theo's shoulder. Nothing really belongs to you, unless you make it with your own hands, buddy. Your grandma taught me that the hard way. Theo nodded. Then he asked for more cobbler. After everyone left, I cleaned the kitchen slowly. Washed Lorraine's china by hand. Dried each plate. Put them back in the cabinet. Then, I walked to the bedroom. Under the bed, the lockbox. I knelt down, pulled it out, turned the combination dial. Inside, beneath the deed to the house and our marriage certificate, one final envelope. Cream-colored. Red wax seal. Lorraine's handwriting. For Earl. Open. September 2025. I stared at it. September 2025. This month. She had known. Even then, she had known exactly when this moment would come. I carried the envelope to the kitchen table and set it down. Not yet, but soon. Tonight. I opened the envelope at 10:32 that night. The house was dark, except for the pendant light over the kitchen table. The same circle of warm light where Lorraine had reviewed invoices every evening. The same table where she had written her numbers on that yellow legal pad. The same chair where I had read her first letter 8 months ago and promised to see it through. Now it was September. The windows were open, and the night air carried the smell of the garden. Basil and rosemary, and the faint sweetness of the Confederate jasmine climbing the back fence. Crickets sang in the darkness beyond the porch. The house was quiet in a way that used to feel empty but tonight felt full. Full of the evening we had just shared. Full of Lorraine's china put away clean. Full of Theo's laughter still echoing in the walls. I broke the wax seal. Red, pressed into the fleur-de-lis pattern she used for everything important. The crack of it felt final. Like closing a book. 3 pages. Notebook paper. Blue ink. Her handwriting steady at first, then softer toward the end, the letters rounding out the way they did when she was tired, or emotional, or both. My dearest Earl, if you are reading this, 20 months have passed. Maybe more. And I need you to know something before anything else. I am proud of you. I know what it cost you to follow my plan. I know you doubted yourself. I know there were nights you sat at this table and wondered if what we were doing was cruel instead of kind. I know because I know you, Earl Fontaine. 40 years of knowing you. And you are still the most decent man I have ever met. Too decent. Sometimes. Which is why I had to build the plan for you. Because you would have forgiven Marcus too soon and let him take what he did not earn and called it love. But love is not giving people what they want. Love is giving them what they need. Even when it hurts. Now I have 5 things to ask of you. My last 5 requests. And Earl, I need you to do every single one. First, forgive Marcus completely. Not halfway. Not with conditions. Completely. Not because he deserved it from the start, but because you deserve to be free. Bitterness is a poison, Earl. It will kill you faster than any stroke killed me. Let it go. Your son came home. That is enough. That is everything. God did not put forgiveness in our hearts, so we could ration it. Second, let Celia lead. Our daughter is ready. She has been ready for years, but she needed room to grow into it without my shadow. Trust her the way you trusted me. She has my hands and your heart. And that combination will build something that outlasts both of us. Third, spoil Theo. Buy that boy ice cream every Sunday. Teach him to make a roux before he turns 10. Take him fishing on the Wilmington River, the way your daddy took you. Tell him stories about his crazy grandmother who started a restaurant empire with $47 and a borrowed stove. He needs to know where he comes from. That is our legacy, Earl. Not money, not buildings. Stories told at kitchen tables. Fourth, live. Earl Fontaine, I need you to hear me. Do not spend the next 20 years mourning me. Do not eat dinner alone every night at that table and pretend I am sitting across from you. I am giving you permission. Permission to laugh out loud again. Permission to travel somewhere you have never been. Permission to sleep past 6 on Sundays. And Earl, listen to me carefully. If you find someone who makes you smile the way I used to, do not you dare feel guilty. I will not be jealous. I will be grateful. God put love in this world in abundance, and there is no sin in accepting it. I will be cheering for you from the other side. I promise. Fifth, remember that we won. Dwayne Curtis is gone. Janelle is gone. The vultures scattered the moment the carcass had nothing left to pick. But our family still stands. Celia is thriving. Marcus came home. Theo is growing up knowing what hard work looks like because his father shows him every single day. And the recipes, Mama Irene's recipes, the ones she taught me at 16 on a wood-burning stove in Beaufort, they are alive. They are being cooked every night in a kitchen that carries my name. That is victory, Earl. That is everything. She had underlined the next part twice. We won, my love. Not because we punished anyone. Not because we got revenge. We won because our family survived. Because Marcus learned. Because Celia built. Because Theo will grow up knowing that nothing worth having comes without cost. And then the closing. The last words Lorraine Fontaine ever wrote to me. I will be waiting for you in that big kitchen in the sky, Earl Fontaine. I have already got the roux started. But you take your time, my love. You still have recipes to teach, and grandchildren to spoil, and Sunday dinners to cook. The Lord gave you time. Use it well. I love you. I loved you in 1984 when you taught me how to balance a checkbook, and I taught you how to season a cast-iron pan. I loved you through every hard day, every late night, every argument about suppliers, and every quiet morning drinking coffee at this table. I loved you when the money was gone, and I loved you when it came back, and I loved you most on the ordinary Tuesdays, when nothing happened at all. You were my home, Earl. You always will be. Forever and past forever. Your Lorraine. I set the letter down on the table and cried. Not the quiet grief I had carried for 20 months. Not the controlled tears I had shed alone in my truck or at her graveside. This was loud and ugly and full. The kind of crying that shakes your ribs and steals your breath and sounds like something breaking open that needed to break. I cried for Lorraine. For the 7 months she spent dying and planning and fighting for our family when she should have been resting. For the mornings she dragged herself to Helen's office when the treatments made her too weak to stand. For the love that went into every page of every letter and every number on every legal pad. I cried for Marcus. For the boy on the chair stirring roux. For the man on the kitchen floor, holding his son. I cried for myself. For 20 months of carrying this alone. For doing the hardest thing I have ever done, and not knowing until this moment whether it was right. We did it. Lorraine, I whispered to the empty room. My voice was raw and broken. He came back. Celia is leading. Theo is happy. We won, sweetheart. We won. I sat there until the tears stopped. Then I folded the letter carefully, pressed it to my lips, and placed it back in the envelope. I put it in the lockbox with the others. 3 letters, 3 seals broken. 1 plan completed. I walked out the back door into the garden. The September night was warm. Moonlight silvered the basil plants and the rosemary hedge and the jasmine on the fence. The air smelled alive, green and growing and full of something that might have been peace. I stood there for a long time, breathing, just breathing, and feeling, for the first time in 20 months, that Lorraine was not gone. She was here, in the garden she planted, in the food her daughter cooked, in the son who finally came home, in the grandson who would carry her recipes forward. "Thank you," I said to the night, to the garden, to her. Then I went inside, turned off the light, and slept. I drove to Bonaventure Cemetery at 6:30 the next morning. The September sun was just breaking over the marshes east of Savannah, turning the cordgrass gold and the river silver. Spanish moss hung from the live oaks lining the cemetery road like curtains made of time itself, swaying in the salt breeze that came off the water. Bonaventure is an old place. Headstones dating back to the 1700s. Marble angels with moss-stained faces. Iron gates rusted open, never closed. Lorraine and I had bought plots here 15 years ago, under an oak, so old its branches touched the ground. She had said she wanted to rest where she could hear the river and smell the salt. "Bury me where things grow," she told me, "not where things end." Her grave was easy to find. The headstone had been placed in April. Gray granite, smooth and simple, the way she had requested. Her name, her dates, and the words we had chosen together. Lorraine Marie Fontaine, 1960 to 2024. Cook, mother, builder. Real wealth is what you make with your own hands. I knelt in the damp grass and set a small bouquet of white chrysanthemums against the stone. Her favorite. She used to grow them along the back fence every autumn. Said they were the last flowers brave enough to bloom before winter. I pulled her letter from my jacket pocket, the one I had read last night, and I read it aloud, quietly, the way you read a prayer. Let the words carry across the morning air to wherever she was listening. When I finished, I pressed my palm flat against the cool granite, felt the smoothness of it under my fingers. Solid, permanent, like her. "I will see you again, Lorraine," I said. "But not yet. I still have recipes to teach, and a grandson who needs ice cream on Sundays." I stood up, knees aching, back stiff, 67 years old and feeling every one of them, but not heavy. Not anymore. I drove to Tybee Island, parked in the small lot behind Lorraine's kitchen. The morning was already warming, the way September does in coastal Georgia. Heat rising off the pavement, seagulls calling from the dunes across the street, the smell of salt and something else. Something coming from inside. Coffee, butter, the first whisper of a roux beginning. I did not go in right away. I stood at the window and looked through the glass. Celia was at the prep station. Her chef's coat stretched over her belly, showing Marcus how to fillet a redfish the way Mama Irene had taught Lorraine 50 years ago. Blade flat, angle low. One smooth pull along the spine. Marcus watched with his whole body leaned in, hands still, eyes tracking every movement of the knife. Learning. Patient. Present. At the stove, Theo stood on a step stool, wearing a chef's hat 3 sizes too big that kept sliding over his eyes. He pushed it back with one hand and stirred a stock pot with the other. Slow, steady circles, the way his grandmother had taught his father when his father was small enough to need a chair. Reggie stood behind the boy, arms crossed, watching. Not correcting, just watching, and humming something low and bluesy, the way he always did when the kitchen felt right. 4 people in a small kitchen on an island at the edge of the continent. Cooking. Building. Continuing. I felt Lorraine then. Not as an absence. Not as grief. As presence. She was in Celia's hands, steady and precise on the knife. She was in Marcus's patience, hard-won and real. She was in Theo's stirring, constant and unhurried. She was in the roux darkening on the stove, turning from blonde to gold to copper the way it always had and always would. She had built something that would outlast both of us. That was the only legacy worth leaving. I walked inside. Took my seat at the corner table. Celia looked up and smiled. "Morning, Dad. Coffee is ready." "Morning, baby. Smells like your mama in here." She laughed. "It always does." I sat with my coffee and watched my family cook. And I thought about what this whole journey had taught me. Not about business or money or legal traps. About something simpler and harder. You cannot hand someone what they have not built. Not respect. Not legacy. Not love. These things only become real when they cost something. When they require early mornings and calloused hands and showing up on the days you do not want to. When they are earned through patience and repetition and failure and trying again. Lorraine understood that better than anyone I have ever known. She understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone fall. Not to punish them. Not for revenge. But because some lessons cannot be taught with words. They have to be lived. They have to be felt in the body. In the aching back and the burned hands and the empty bank account and the quiet apartment where you finally have nothing left except the people who still show up. God gives us free will for a reason. We learn through choices and their consequences. We grow through loss. We become who we were meant to be, not when everything goes right, but when everything goes wrong and we choose to rebuild anyway. If you are facing your own moment right now, whether you are the father watching from the corner table or the son learning to stir the roux or somewhere in between, I want you to hear this. Do not give your children what they have not earned. Do not save them from every failure. And do not mistake a lesson for cruelty. Real love sometimes looks like stepping back. Real legacy is not what you leave behind. It is what you teach the people you love to build for themselves. A recipe is not just ingredients. It is love measured in patience. It is showing up before dawn. It is 41 tries before the roux is right. It is starting over every time someone tells you it is not good enough, until one day it is. Build something worth passing down. Then make sure the people you love know how to build it themselves. That is the only inheritance that cannot be stolen, sold, or lost in a bankruptcy court. That is what Lorraine taught me. That is what she taught Marcus. That is what Theo is learning one stir at a time. And that, right there, is the only story worth telling. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this journey. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of someone you love or a lesson you learned the hard way, I would be grateful if you shared your thoughts below. Tell me your story. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me about the person who taught you that nothing worth having comes free. And if you want more stories about family, legacy, and the lessons love teaches us when words are not enough, subscribe. I will be here, at my corner table, with my coffee, waiting to tell you the next one. I drove home that morning with the windows down. Spanish moss swaying overhead. The salt air warm on my face. And somewhere in that breeze, faint but unmistakable, I caught the smell of gumbo. Rich and dark and slow cooked. The way only one woman in the world ever made it. She was still cooking. She would always be cooking. And that was the only legacy worth leaving.